Currently Inked, episode number 12 for September 2nd, 2016, is sponsored by OpenBook Audio. More information at openbookaudio.com. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Currently Inked. Got a fun show today. Lots of fun news. Gonna talk a little bit about the San Francisco Pen Show, show you what I picked up, which is always a fun thing, and answer a few questions. So, let's start off with the news. Probably the best news of the week is I am officially no longer unemployed. Yay! I got a new job this week. So I will start on September 19th. I will be working for the U.S. Cell phone provider, T-Mobile. I'm going to be on the team that is responsible for doing their customer website, where you do payments and upgrade your plans and that sort of thing. I don't know exactly what aspect of that I'm going to be working on, but I'm going to be working on that area. So that's very exciting. I'm busting my butt for the next couple weeks to try to get as many videos done as I can before I start work on the 19th, just because I want to get as many of these ready to go and in the can. So if work is crazy for the first few months, which it often is when you start a new job, I will be covered and videos will continue to come out. So that's what I am working on right now. So that is the good news. Very exciting good news. The other news is September 19th, which is the Saturday before I go back to work, is when the first review video of season 4 will come out. So if you are, I get this question a lot, September 17th, that's when the next video's, basically 2 weeks from today, or tomorrow, I guess, technically. So they're coming. There's the first one. The first ones are done. The Currently Inked will continue, as I mentioned last week. The goal is to try to do one Currently Inked and one review every week. That's the goal. We'll see how that works out now that I'm back to work again, but that's kind of the goal. So let's dive in with a question, shall we? This first one comes from Joel Walmsley from Cork in Ireland. And Joel asks, I'd love to get a fountain pen with an Architect nib. What's the best way to do it? Are there any manufacturers that sell stock Architect nibs that I can just buy off the shelf, or will it require a custom grime from a nibster or nibmeister? If the latter, what's the best nib to start with? A broad, i.e. with lots of tipping, or something else? Oh yeah, and let's just say that I'm operating in the lower echelons of the budgetary spectrum, if you catch my drift. Okay, so for those who aren't familiar with Architect nibs are, I call them 90-degree stubs. So, you know, a normal stub, if let's say that this is the top of a normal stub right here, you know, or an italic nib, so that's the top of the nib. An Architect nib is like this. So the horizontal lines are going to be tall and the vertical lines are going to be very narrow. It used to be called a Hebrew grind, and sometime a couple years ago, someone changed the name to Architect nib, and I'm not entirely sure when that happened. Now, as far as I know, there are no manufacturers who stock Architect nibs in-house. Probably the closest thing you could get to that, if you wanted to buy it, is a Sailor, cross-point nib. That's kind of an Architect grind. But those are uber expensive and very specialty and getting harder and harder to find because, Nagahara-san from Sailor of Japan is not doing as many of these as he used to. So what I will say in that respect is generally out of the box, you're not going to get an Architect nib or a Hebrew nib or whatever it is. So you're going to need to go to a nibmeister. Another big reason that you need to go to a nibmeister is that the angle at which you write is going to play a big part in the pen, or in the grind. So if you hold your pen like this, obviously you're going to want the flat part of the nib on the paper like this. So when they grind it down to that flat point, the angle at which they do it is really dependent on how you hold the pen. Since I hold my pen at about 45-degree angle, that's how it would need to be ground. When I had an Architect grind done in Washington, D.C. by Dan Smith, nibsmith.com, He actually had me hold the pen and write with it a little bit, just it wasn't inked, but just write with it on the paper so he could see how I held the pen, and then he ground it to that specification. I talked with him at the San Francisco show, and he said normally when he does architect grinds, he wants someone to, hold the pen like they're writing and then take a picture with their phone from the side angle so he can see the angle at which the pen is resting against the paper. So ideally, architect grinds are best done by a nibmeister. When it comes to what tipping you want, it's always easier to take tipping off than add it back on. So go with the broadest nib you can find and then tell them what you want it ground down to. I had an architect ground from a medium nib, and it's perfect for me because I didn't want a really wide architect nib. I just wanted kind of a medium width architect nib. So that worked out fine. But you can always take it down and have more ground off. You can't add more back on without having to go through this whole process that's very expensive. So yeah, find a broad nib, find a nibmeister who will grind it for you. Make sure you take a picture of how you hold the pen so they can grind it at the right angle. And that's the best way to get an architect's nib. Architect grind, rather. Okay, so San Francisco. So I mentioned in my last video that I was kind of last minute going to the San Francisco Pen Show. I drove down. It was a 14-hour drive. It took forever, but at least it was a very pretty drive. Parts of that drive from Seattle down to San Francisco are gorgeous. And I have to say, for sheer visual appeal as you enter the city, I think San Francisco pretty much takes the cake because you're coming around the water, you get on this lovely bridge, you turn the corner and there's the city there with the Transamerica building and the bay off to the right-hand side. It's just a gorgeous looking city. Now, the San Francisco Pen Show isn't in San Francisco. In fact, I just drove through San Francisco. I didn't actually go to San Francisco at all. It's in Redwood City. It's very close to the Oracle offices, if you're into the computer thing at all. Also, the Facebook offices are right near there. So we're kind of nestled right there in the heart of Silicon Valley. Really, it's a nice hotel. It wasn't one of my favorites, I have to admit. My room had a few issues, but I was really, really impressed with this show. It was well organized, it was energetic, it was fun, the people were really nice, it was just a good show. They had a lot of after show activities for people who are social. I am not a social person, so that was a little for me, but there was a lot of activity, a lot of chances to talk. They had a nice big bar area with lots of really comfy couches so you could hang out and chat. I stayed up on Sunday night before I left Monday morning. I think I stayed up until 1:30 just down there talking with different people and having a great time. So the show was a blast. When I went down, I was just going down to socialize, but before I went, I emailed Van Ness Pens because I knew that they were having a booth and they had talked to me about possibly coming down and helping with the show. And I had originally not planned. I had just emailed them and said, "Hey, do you need any help? I'm not doing anything when I come down." And Lisa emailed me back and said, "Sure, we'd love some help." So I helped out on Friday afternoon, all day Saturday, and Sunday afternoon at the Van Ness table. And what I discovered, because I had helped at their table in DC on Saturday and had a great time doing it. I really enjoy that part of it because I get to talk with a lot of people and help them find the inks that they're going to like. But the thing that I found interesting is, of the 4 pen shows that I've been to now, this show had more first-time pen show attendees than any other show I'd ever attended. And it was great. People had a lot of questions. They were asking a lot of questions. They were really wanting to understand and find what was right for them. And so it was a very different feel than Los Angeles, even than DC. It's only about a third the size of the DC show, but there's still a lot there, and it was packed. DC, they have a Trader Day on Friday, a public day on Saturday, and a public day on Sunday. Los Angeles, the only public day they have is on Sunday. In San Francisco, it was public on Friday from 1 to 7, on Saturday from 10 to 7, excuse me, and on Sunday from 10 to 5. So there was a lot of public days. The result of that was that people would, more people were willing to come for the whole weekend because they could pay $10 a day instead of getting the full Trader's Pass. They couldn't come in early or get the included breakfast if you got the weekend Trader Pass, that kind of thing. But it was a more consistent level of busy. Friday was actually pretty busy. Saturday was busy. Even Sunday was pretty busy. So it wasn't one of these, slow, and then slammed with people like it was in Los Angeles. So it was a really interesting take, one that I liked a lot. And I'm not a retailer, but because I was working with a retailer who caters to people who are kind of mostly getting into the fountain pen hobby early on, Van Ness Pens doesn't carry a lot of really high-end expensive pens to the shows. They're about the ink and some of the, there's lots of Pilot Metropolitans and Lamy Safaris and some of the specialty stuff that they have in their back room, because they've had a brick and mortar location since 1938. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. I had a great time. I broke my drive back home into 2 days because 14 hours is a long drive, especially for me, who gets fidgety after about 3. So I spent the night in Ashland, Oregon, which is where the Oregon Shakespearean Festival is. Unfortunately, all the theaters were dark that night, so I didn't get to see a show, which was kind of disappointing. But I stayed at a really nice hotel there because earlier that day I had gotten a notice that I'd gotten a job, and I was like, "Yay! I can stay in something other than a Motel 6! Yay!" And then drove home the rest of the way, picked up Luke the dog, and had just been kind of getting back into the swing of things for the next couple weeks. So it was a great trip. If you're on the West Coast and you're looking for a first-time show, I cannot recommend San Francisco highly enough. It was a great vibe, a lot of energy, a lot of fun. So there you go. All right, let's do another question. A very common question from Becca, who is located in Minneapolis. And Becca asks, what is your policy on keeping versus tossing boxes new pens arrive in? I'm feeling overrun. Becca, I feel your pain. I have 2 shelves in my closet that are dedicated to pen boxes. I am a keeper, and I come from a family of like clinical hoarders. It skipped my parents' generation. I got it from my maternal grandparents, who I've told this story several times. I don't know if I've ever told it here, but basically, my grandmother lived in the same house for 65 years and was a clinical hoarder. When she passed away last summer, we spent weeks throwing away. I mean, we found cans of gravel and bags of pine cones and thousands of golf balls and, just an avalanche of crap. So I do have a little bit of that hoarder gene in me. What I will say is I keep my pen boxes, I keep them organized so they're nicely stacked and organized and fit on the shelf. And if the shelf gets a little busy, I pull them all down and restack them and reorganize them because I can't stand clutter. But I keep them because if I ever want to sell my pens, a lot of people prefer to buy their pens with the original packaging. Now, I know a lot of people don't do that. They just get rid of their boxes, and I understand that, and that's fine. I keep mine. If there's a really nice box, especially, I will keep it. I've got a really, really special, it's a gigantic box for my Wall Eversharp Deco Band. It's piano black and got the hinged lid and the whole 9 yards. Same thing with the box for my Omaso Jiva Celluloid. So I generally keep my boxes, but I keep them organized. And that's really helped when I decide to sell some of my pens. I've got the original packaging. I can just slip it back in there, and if you take care of your pen, people will barely know that it's not brand new. So that's my approach. I prefer to keep them. You might want to get yourself a nice Rubbermaid tote or something that you can slide under your bed to put your pen boxes in, somewhere where they'll be out of the way, but you can access them if you need them. All right, well, before we dive into some of my acquisitions from San Francisco, let's take a quick minute to talk about the sponsor for this week's episode. Now, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but if you don't know, I narrate audiobooks freelance. It's something I've been doing for about, 7, 8 years now. I really enjoy it. I'm a big audiobook fan, and I think a lot of people who listen to podcasts and, commute have become audiobook fans over the last several years. So several years ago, I started a company called Open Book Audio with a friend of mine, and we serve independent authors and small publishing companies. So we've got some really great titles in the catalog. One that I think people who like like Currently Inked and like to use pens and write might really enjoy are a series of books by an author called Brian McDonald. Brian McDonald is a local Seattle author who has written a series of books called The Golden Theme, Ink Spots, and Invisible Ink, and they're all about storytelling. How to structure a story, how to tell story. Brian has been asked to come and speak at Pixar, a company that is renowned for storytelling with their films. He teaches classes. They're really short, happy, punchy books. Lots and lots of great information in them. So that might be one book that you like. And Open Book Audio's books are available at Audible, audiobooks.com, even through your local library, through Overdrive or Findaway World. So you can head over to openbookaudio.com, take a look at all the titles in our catalog. There's nearly 200, and find a title that fits you. There's links to all the stores where you can buy it, and we want to thank Open Book Audio for supporting The Pen Habit this week. So this next question comes from James, aka Papa Cass from Scotland. James asked, I don't know much about nib size. You sometimes talk about standard number 6 nibs and proprietary size nibs. Could you take some time to describe the dimensions of standard nib sizes and the typical size of pen that each nib might be found on? And a bit about the main companies that produce them, like Yovo, etc. So this is a fraught area, and there's a lot of information in here. So we'll kind of, to start off with, let's split old nibs, vintage nibs, and modern nibs apart. Vintage nibs, there's no rhyme or reason to their numbering scheme, for the most part. Each company has their own rhyme or reason, but there's no standard. With modern nibs, those made especially by Yovo and Bock, you can get them from Knox, from X Fountain Pens, and some of the, the cheap Chinese nibs, the what are they called? The IPG nibs, Iridium Point Germany nibs, so kind of the no-name nibs. The numbering size indicates the size, the width of the feed. So a number 6 nib would have a feed that is 6 millimeters across. A number 5 nib would have a feed that is 5 millimeters across. Now that's a very rough approximation, and there's no real standard per se, but generally, if you're talking about a modern pen, all number 5 nibs should be interchangeable mostly between pens. I believe that the nib in the TWSBI Eco, for instance, is a 4.5, a 4.5 nib, which, again, will have a slightly narrower feed. But that's only for those, those very standard shaped nibs. Once you get outside of that standard shaped nib, you're kind of playing a crapshoot here. So, I've talked about it before, but my Waterman 56 has a 6 nib on it, and it's a vintage nib. I have not pulled it apart to try to put it on there, but my hunch is it's probably not going to fit perfectly in a number 6 nib that's in use today. It's probably going to be different. Likewise, Pilot uses an entirely different numbering system on their nibs. So they've got a number 5 nib, a number 10 nib, a number 15 nib, I think they've even got a number 20 nib. So in general, if you're talking about Bock or Yovo nibs, the numbers will mean the same. It basically means the feed width. Aside from that, it's kind of all over the place. So if your pen doesn't take one of those screw-in nib units, you're gonna just be aware that if you buy a replacement nib, it might not fit. and you just have to learn what works with what. I've been doing this for long enough and seen enough pens that I'm starting to be able to just look at a nib and tell what size it is and tell who made it. Especially if I can look at the feed as well. JoWo feeds in particular have a very unique profile on their number 6 nibs. Bock nibs have a couple of different feed profiles that I've started to recognize. So I wish there's a little bit more I could give you, but aside from those modern JoWo and Bock nibs in number 5 and number 6 sizes, which are the most standard, that's kind of all there is to it. So, all right, drink of water. Oh, one of my acquisitions is this lovely little Yeti that Van Ness Pens brought me. So it's a 30-ounce Yeti, and on one side they engraved my Inky Fingers logo, and on the other side they engraved the Pen Habit Biohazard logo. So I love this thing. And, you know, allow me to say Yetis, I have had a lot of insulated mugs. Yetis do the best job of keeping stuff cool of anything I've ever seen. I put ice in this thing, came back 24 hours later, and there was still ice left, and that never happens. So, all right, what we've all been waiting for, acquisitions. I did not get a lot of pens at this show. I did get a lot of ink. So you can see the gold labels up here. In fact, I'm probably gonna need to turn those around because those are uber bright. Yeah, we'll have to move those around at another show, I think. I've been moving ink around to try to find the best place where it won't cause reflections from the lighting. There we go. And it's hard because a lot of these companies use white boxes, and white does not do well when you've got bright lighting like this. It gets really reflective. So I got a lot of ink. So these bottles right here are Robert Oster inks, and I think those are going to be the inks you're going to be hearing a lot about over the next 6 months. Robert Oster Signature is a line of inks from Australia. I think there's 47 colors now. There's going to be 50 total. On the wet side, easy to clean. A lot of the inks have really good sheen in them, which if you're into sheen, that's kind of special. And they're pretty affordable. They're $16 a bottle here in the US. Excuse me. I think you can get them cheaper if you're in Australia. They've got some great colors, especially in the turquoise, blue-green, teal, aqua families. I showed an aqua ink in my last episode of Currently Inked. I picked up 10 bottles. So I'm pretty serious. I'm pretty serious about trying out this ink. I haven't inked any. I've only inked up that one ink, the aqua ink, which I love. But I picked up a bunch of other ones, including a khaki ink that looks really kind of cool. So I'm excited to try that as well. So I picked up those. I got a bottle of the J. Herbin Caroube de Chypre, which should be coming out soon, or which has come out just recently. It's that brown ink with the glitter. I picked up a couple bottles of, oh shoot, what is it? Where is it? It's Scribe ink. So it's a company here in the US. He's making his own ink, and it's a document ink. So I got a document green and a document brown. Unfortunately, the document green ink, the lid on that ink was not well sealed, and I didn't check it before I loaded up my suitcase. So when fortunately I was still at the hotel, but I opened up my suitcase to put in one thing I forgot, and all of a sudden I saw this green spot in the webbing of my suitcase. It's like, well, where did that come from? And then I went, oh no, and pulled the ink out, and it got everywhere. It was everywhere, and I forgot to put it in a Ziploc bag because I'm stupid. So I threw that bottle away, cleaned off all the rest of the bottles. I've still got the bottle of brown, but unfortunately that was served as a real good reminder. Always check the lids on your bottles of ink before you pack them in your suitcase, and always put them in individual Ziploc bags, so if one leaks, they don't contaminate all the other bottles and boxes. Anyway, so those were my ink acquisitions, and I got a lot of those. As far as pens, I kept the number fairly small. The first one I got is this. This is a Parker Duofold Centennial, and I believe this is the Streamline. This came out in the late 90s. It is kind of a reissue of the Parker Duofold of yore. This is the lapis blue material, and it really is that color. It's deep, rich blue. These Parker Duofolds are interesting pens. These Duofold Centennials are interesting pens. They're not cheap. I paid $375, which I thought was a pretty good price. I saw this pen for more at other vendors, but there were several who had them. But the nibs on these are really spectacular. Super smooth. They're fairly rigid nibs. They're gold nibs, but they're fairly rigid. And you won't be able to see it well here, I don't think, but it's got a really neat design on it. So I will, when I do the photos of this, you'll be able to see the design. But nice design on the nib. Really nicely made, perfectly glossy, just really lovely. Nice fit in the hand. I dip tested it at the show. I have not yet inked it up yet, so I can't tell you what it's inked with because I actually haven't inked anything since I've gotten back from the show. I have been too busy trying to get through my review pens before I start work. So this will be one that I'll probably ink up and take to work with me when I start in a couple weeks. So that was one. We'll get to the next one after another question. So let me dive into questions again. So Quack from Phoenix, who submits quite a few questions. This is a variety of a question he submitted earlier and I just never got around to answering. There are a lot of lovely inks that are limited edition, such as the Caran d'Ache Grand Canyon or the Mont Blanc Honoré de Balzac Dandy Turquoise. Do you think you could recreate them by using Platinum's mix-free ink? Short answer is not fully, I don't think. I think you could approximate the color. I don't think you could approximate the writing characteristics, especially the shading and the sheen. By using the mix-free kits, you're able to play around with that, but a lot of times the sheen and the shading are components of the dyes, and when you're using base color dyes and mixing them together like that, my hunch is you're not going to be, you'll be able to get real close approximations of the colors, but not necessarily all of those other writing characteristics. I get the sense that, and I've never used the Platinum mix-free inks, so I don't know, maybe someone else has and they've had a different experience. My hunch is that it's probably going to be a little bit more like what I got with the Tecker inks, which are over my shoulder back there. The company that you pick a hex code from their website and they'll make an ink, which is they get really close to the color, but the inks are just a little on the undersaturated side and they don't have, and a little flat, a little matte looking. So that's something that I suspect is what would come out from the mix-free inks. But like I said, I've never used them, so I don't know. Okay, acquisition from San Francisco, number 2. Now, Kenro Industries is the U.S. distributor of Aurora pens, which Aurora is an Italian company. I listed the Aurora Optima as my number 3 favorite pen for last season. I've got one in blue. It's a beautiful pen. It writes amazingly well. And Aurora just knocked the prices down here in the U.S. They knocked almost $200 off the price. So it went from being a $600, $650 pen to being about a $440 pen. And in my mind, that takes an already wonderful pen and makes it almost impossible to pass up, especially when it comes in materials like this. Look at that. This is the green model. It's got a lot of blue in it, so it's almost a teal, but it is a gorgeous material. Now, and this is why I hope people watch these whole videos. Kenro Industries is really stepping up the pen giveaway game this season, because on the Pen Habit in the next week or two, I'm going to be giving away an Aurora Optima. It is a $450 pen provided by Kenro Industries. You get to pick the color you want. You get to pick the nib you want, and they will ship it to you. There's 4 colors. There is a silver and gray flake, or silver gray black flake pen. There is a burgundy, there is this gorgeous green, and there is the blue that I reviewed earlier. The other thing about Aurora is they are one of the only companies who actually make their own nibs in-house anymore. There's a few, but they're one of the only European companies who still do. I think Montblanc and Pelican also make their nibs in-house, but they have ebonite feeds in their pens, which a lot of pens still use plastic feeds. They still machine ebonite feeds, and you can get like a page. There's a ton. I don't know how well you can see this, but there are a ton of fins in this feed. You can actually probably get a page or a page and a half of writing out of just a dip on this pen. But they also have a lot of really unique nib grinds from the factory. So you can get true crisp italics, you can get obliques, you can get stubs, you can get broads, extra fines. So they have a ton of nib options. So Kenro is going to be doing a giveaway. Make sure if you don't, follow me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter or check penhabit.com regularly, because in the next day or two, I'm going to put up the entry form for a giveaway. It is a huge giveaway, an Aurora Optima. I mean, come on, who gives away one of these things? So they are giving away an Aurora Optima, and it's amazing. This is one of my favorite pens, and this green one is heart. So thank you, Kenro. Very exciting. All right, so that will be coming up in the next few days, so keep an eye out for that. And we're going to do one more question. Let me see where we are with time-wise here. Oh, we're running long, so let me do one more question and one more pen, and we'll get wrapped up here. Paul from Massachusetts, learn how to talk, asks, can a pen that runs a little too wet or a little too dry, but short of needing a nib adjustment, usually be helped by changing brands of ink? Could you cite some brands that are typically regarded as dry or wet, but which aren't explicitly sold as lubricated? Short answer is yes-ish. It depends on why it's running too dry or too wet. If it's a nib adjustment issue, that could do it. If it's a feed engineering problem, that might not help. It just kind of depends. Inks that tend to run dry, in my experience, J. Urban inks, not the 1670, but the regular production line J. Urban. Rohrer and Klingner inks, I've got some of those up there. The Graf von Faber-Castell inks tend to run a little on the dry side. Let me just do a quick check. Some of the Kaweco inks tend to run a little on the dry side. And the Quizzy, a lot of Iron Gall-ish inks will tend to run a little dry. The Quizzy Iron Gall still seem to do pretty well, but they are a touch drier than the regular standard Quizzy inks. As far as wet inks, standard line Quizzy, Sailor, let me back up. Pelikan Edelstein inks and Pelikan 4001 inks also tend to run a little on the dry side. Wetter inks tend to be Diamine, Deatramentis, Quizzy Standard Line, Ackermann, and Sailor. I think those are all kind of, and then, Pilot Iroshizuku. Those all tend to run a little bit on the wetter side. It also depends on the color. Some colors, especially really saturated colors, will tend to feel a little more wet, or they'll clog your pen, depending on which. Montblanc inks and Diamine inks, I think, are very nice middle-of-the-road inks. A lot of Sailor inks feel very middle-of-the-road, too. They're not super wet. Private Reserve Tanzanite is known as the laxative of inks. It's supposed to just flow. Aurora Black flows really nicely. I'm just checking some of the other ones that I've got. Franklin Christoph will tend to run a little on the dry side, as will the Caran d'Ache Chromatics. So that gives you a sense. Lami's kind of middle of the road, I feel. The Robert Oster inks are going to be a little bit wet. So it's one of those things you learn over time. I'll be real honest, with the exception of only a couple of inks, I don't notice a huge difference in wet and dry ink flow. I think it is far more dependent on the nib and the feed than it is on the ink itself, with a few exceptions. Some inks just really flow. I think of Deatramentis Aubergine, it's a wet ink. Private Reserve Tanzanite, wet ink. Aurora Black, very wet ink. And then the Graf von Faber-Castells tend to run, I think of all the inks in my collection, those are probably some of the driest running inks that I've got. So keep that in mind. All right, gonna wrap this up here really quickly. The final pen acquisition is a real unicorn in the fountain pen world. Now, I've been looking for one of these since I got its brother a couple of years ago. I've only seen two ever in person. One was from the DC show in 2015, and one was in San Francisco. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Waterman's Ideal number 7 with a pink nib. So I have been looking for one of these for a long time. These are not cheap pens at all. This was quite expensive. This was, I think, $1,100 is what I paid for it. So this pen is from the late 20s, probably early 30s. Waterman's Ideal 7s had a bunch of different nib options, and they differentiated which nib was which by this little color band in the cap. So I have a red nib, which is the medium flex nib. So it has a medium point and it flexes. This is the pink nib, which is the extra fine flex. So it's a little bit flexier than the red nib. It's a little bit longer, narrower, but it goes to a very fine point. So if you wanted to play around with copperplate or Spencerian using a fountain pen, this is one of the pens with which you do it. It is amazing. This nib is so wonderful. So it's got the keyhole nib there. It gets, it probably goes from an extra fine to a double broad in writing. And I'll do a review of this because heart. But these are really, really tricky to find. This one's in very, very nice condition. The nib is wonderful. I got it from I think it's flexinibs.com. Is that? I'll look it up and put it in the show notes. So head over to penhabit.com to see the show notes. You can find the link in the description below. But it's this nib. I saw it on Friday, and I saw the price, and I just about collapsed right there at John's table. And John is about the guy who from whom I bought this is about the nicest human being I have ever met in my entire life. And I feel like he gets the new people who are coming into the hobby and want to try this. He will let you dip and test any nib on his table. He walks you through how to do it if you don't know. He'll work with, talk to you, help you figure out what you're looking for. Almost every pen on his table had a flex nib in it. He had a big flexi nib balloon hanging next to his table. And he had some great stuff at his table. His table was swarmed pretty much all weekend. I saw it on Friday. After I, restarted my heart after seeing the price tag, I thought, you know what? I didn't come to buy anything, but these almost never come up. So I'm going to wait until Sunday. And if it's still there on Sunday, I will take it as a sign that I'm supposed to have it. If it's gone, it wasn't meant to be. And that's something I do a lot at pen shows. It's like when it's to try to combat that impulse purchase thing that I'm really bad at. So I went and worked at the Van Ness booth the rest of Friday and all day Saturday, and Sunday morning rolled around and I was like, well, let's just see. So I meandered by his table. It was still there. I finished my loop around the hall, and then I was like, you know what? I might not find another one of these for a long, long time, especially not one in this good of condition. So I went back and I bought it. And I love this thing. Oh, I love this pen. I didn't buy, 10 pens like I have in the past. I bought 3, but I got 3 really, really nice pens at the San Francisco show. And the longer I stay in the hobby, that's kind of, for me, where I think that my direction is going to be. Fewer pens, but more pens that speak to me and make me really happy. I was thrilled. When I left the show Sunday evening after helping to pack up the Van Ness table, I left the show just like, I could not have been happier with the pens I picked up. I felt the same way about the DC show. It's like, I didn't buy as many pens as I had in the past, but I was really happy with what I got. And so, yeah, it was a good show. I got some good pens. All right, well, I think that is going to do it for this overly long episode of Currently Inked. Thank you if you stuck around. Again, don't forget to follow on Facebook or Twitter. In the next day or two, we're going to be kicking off the giveaway for the Aurora Optima. Are you freaking kidding me? We're giving away an Aurora Optima. That is awesome. So whoever wins that is going to get one hell of a pen. All right. Don't forget to head over to penhabit.com to check out the show notes and links to all of these different things that I've talked about. Don't forget to look in the store if you haven't checked out the new Inky Fingers line of notebooks. Yay, Inky Fingers. We've got pocket and traveler's notebook size on this wonderful wheat straw paper of our Currently Inked log of lined and of blank. And got more coming up on that hopefully in the next couple months. After I get settled in at my new job, then we're going to try to roll out another couple models of notebook for some upcoming stuff. So that's going to be fun as well. And of course, a huge thank you to Open Book Audio for sponsoring this episode of Currently Inked. You can head over to openbookaudio.com to see all the titles and maybe check out those wonderful Inkspot by Brian McDonald and Invisible Ink by Brian McDonald. If you're interested in storytelling or writing, these are great books on the process. And if you listen to them, you'll get to listen to my voice because I'm the one who narrated them. Yeah. Shameless self-promotion. The key to any actor's success. All right. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you here next week on Currently Inked. And of course, we will see you starting September 17th with our very first review of Season 4. So thank you so much. See you then. Bye.